the chat window didn't open. Okay, great. Okay. Thank you everyone for tuning in for another episode of Telehealth Failures and Secrets to Success. This week, we're really privileged to have Dr. Kara joining us. So he has a really interesting background from being a neurosurgeon, become extremely successful tech executive, CEO, and so on. So again, so I'm pretty interested in hearing what he has said. In fact, one of the things we know, a lot of our audience member are physicians who's interested in become entrepreneurs. I think after his former president, we're going to dive into some even the startup, his thoughts on there. I'm pretty excited. I guess, Dr. Carroll, before we maybe officially start, can you just share with us a bit about your background? You know, how did you get into the medical field? How did you get into involved in the sound medical?
Sure, be glad to. I went to college in the early 1970s with the intent of being a astrophysicist. I thought that meant doing physics in outer space. Had no clue beyond that. Got to college and realized that my brain wasn't exactly cut out for that, and started to focus more in the area of brain function, brain activity, and understanding neural mechanisms of learning. In the early 70s, if you were interested in going into science, there was a dearth of science-specific funding available for postgraduate training, so you went to medical school. And since I was interested in the brain, I went to medical school to become a neurosurgeon. I trained and went into practice for only a handful of years after my training. I knew even while I was doing my training that I wanted to get into the area of technology development. And shortly after going out into clinical practice, I founded a small neurosurgery company that played a prominent role in the development of stereotactic applications for brain. That led to work in stereotactic radiosurgery, which was the concept of applying radiation in very precise doses to the brain. And that led to more generic work in the field of radiation oncology, where I was one of the pioneers in a field called intensity modulated radiation therapy. This became prominent in the 1990s and now is the standard of care for the way that we deliver radiation therapy for cancers. About shortly thereafter, in the 2000s, I got involved in looking at energy ablation of cancers, and that led me to join Sonacare Medical, which at the time was called US HIFU. This was in 2014, as a Chief Science or Technology Officer, and became CEO of the company at the end of 2015.
Okay, got it. Okay, wonderful there. I guess, I mean, you have I think all the audience member can read your bio officially in there. Is there something that that's normally it's not on your official bio that sort of people might find interesting? Like, do you have climb tall mountains hobbies or?
I'm in my 7th decade and I still play soccer competitively at a national level. So I guess that's my alter ego, if you will. In my early days, I was a bassoon player, but now focus anytime free time that I have that's not devoted to my 2 young kids. I got married very late, or to the business is pretty much devoted to playing soccer.
Oh, wonderful. That's a really intense game there.
Yeah, especially at my age, because we get together for 4 or 5 days and play 4 or 5 90-minute games without much rest between. So you can only do that periodically over the course of the year because it takes you 6 months to recover.
Oh, awesome. I mean, you would live to 200 years old, I guess.
Yeah, if I can still walk.
I'm pretty sure you can. All right. Again, Dr. Kerr, how about then maybe I'll turn the floor to you. Maybe we'll just have you present, and then we'll open to the audience to ask you questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's see. Show my screen. Okay. Okay. Is that good?
Looks perfect.
Okay. So I'm going to talk to you today about an application that we've developed based upon VSee to work with technology that we have for the non-invasive ablation of cancer. The company is called Sonacare Medical, and we are based in Charlotte. Our premier product at the current time is something called SaunaBlade. It is a means of doing prostate cancer or prostate tissue ablation transrectally in a minimally invasive manner. It's an alternative to surgery or radical surgery. It's been used around the world for about 20 years. Recently was FDA cleared for ablation of prostate tissue in the United States and has been being used in the US for about 2 years now. We use high intensity focused ultrasound. So we have acoustic lenses, if you will, that focus sound waves just the way that you would use a magnifying glass to focus sunlight. At the focal point of the lens, intense amount of heat is created, and with human tissue, whether it is cancer or non-cancerous tissue, if you raise the temperature of the tissue to 60 degrees centigrade for a minimum of a second, you will destroy that tissue. Again, whether it is desirable tissue or non-desirable tissue, it will be destroyed, and therefore very precise and accurate treatment delivery is critical. Our procedure, for simplistic purposes, for the purpose of this discussion, can be divided into two components. The first is the insertion manually by the physician of a probe into the rectum. The probe is about 30 millimeters in diameter at the tip, and you can see in this picture that there is a black area. That is where the acoustic lens is. The motors that drive this lens in and out, up and down, and rotate are based inside the probe body. The electronics are in a separate console. And when this probe is inserted into the rectum and positioned correctly, it is then immobilized. And at that point, the physician no longer engages with the patient. The physician engages with a computer system, and this is one of our screens here, where a plan is created to deliver the energy treatment to the target organ. And the plan includes physician interaction with the computer to monitor the dose that's being delivered, monitor the amount of heat that's created, determine whether that heat is appropriate or not for the tissue, and to make adjustments to the amount of heat that's being delivered. Now, what should be apparent from this description is that if ever there was a procedure that could be done remotely, it is our procedure. Once the probe is in place, the engagement with the computer system can occur in the room, outside the room, across the hall, in the doctor's office, or across the country. The second factor that is critical to understanding why we find VSee to be so valuable to us is that this is a learning curve intensive process. As is any computer program, as is any video game that any of you have played, you have to learn the controls, you have to learn when to intervene, when not to intervene, you have to learn how to assess what's happening, make judgments as to whether to adjust what you're doing based upon what you're seeing, and then interact with the system to do that. There's a learning curve involved here, and there is a comfort level that develops over 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 cases as the treatments are being delivered. It is prohibitively expensive to send doctors elsewhere to be trained. It is prohibitively expensive to send proctors to physician sites to train them. So therefore, we were looking for a solution that would allow us to take advantage of the fact that we have a video game as a medical technology and not have to send people around the country or around the world in order to train new users. Therefore, we worked with VSee to create something that we call Sauna Link. Sauna Link is an inherent part of our technology. It exists with every single one of our devices. And basically, it allows a remote participant to engage in verbal and visual conversation with the surgeon delivering the treatment so that guidance can be given from afar as to how to proceed during the procedure. We do not allow the remote individual to take control of the procedure. We don't have regulatory authorization to do that. But we do have regulatory authorization that allows me, for example, sitting in Charlotte, to interact with Milton in Cupertino if Milton was delivering a prostate ablation, to guide him around the screen, to alert him to alarms or notices that pop up on the screen, to make suggestions as to what to do, to how to do it. Each one of our consoles that's installed in the treatment room is equipped with a camera, with audio input, so that not only can we screen capture through using VSee the information that is being displayed to the surgeon in the treatment room, but the remote individual can also see the surgeon and talk directly to the surgeon, and the surgeon doing the procedure can do the same thing to the remote individual. We also use this technology for diagnostics, so if there's a problem with the machine, we can have one of our tech people dial in using VSee to the console, see what the doctor is seeing on the computer screen, interact with the doctor or with a biomedical technician at the hospital, and advise them and guide them. In addition to using this as a support tool, as you see on the right, where a remote user knowledgeable about the technology is interacting with the physician delivering the treatment, we also use it as a marketing tool, as an educational tool. Oh, again, let's assume that I come out to the West Coast. We have a salesperson there. We have a couple of physicians that are interested in seeing a live case in order to be able to understand whether this is a technology that they want to use in their facility. Rather than sending those physicians from California, let's say, to one of our very active users in North Carolina or in Florida, we can alert the doctor in California to when there will be a treatment being delivered somewhere else in the country. Working through the VSee dial-in service, we can set up the connection that allows that remote physician on the West Coast to observe the case being done in Florida and to interact with the surgeon doing the case, to ask questions, to get guidance and an understanding of how to proceed. This is the Sauna Link network. As you can see here, it's relatively complicated, but down the middle we have the various uses that we make of the technology: tech support, training, case observation, referral assist, and case support and consultation. So the last one we haven't covered, but I may be an experienced user, but I'm seeing a case that I haven't experienced before. So I can, working through Sonacare and through VSee, reach out to a physician somewhere else in the country who is free at that time, have them dial into my case, look at what I'm seeing on the screen, and advise me as to whether there's something that I should be doing differently, or alert me to something that I'm seeing and explain what it is that I haven't seen before. We have remote users. We have people from Sonacare Medical that dial in for tech support. We have experienced users that can provide this case support. We have general urologists who might want to understand and observe a case and we have referring physicians who may or may not be a urologist interfacing with urologists to be able to understand what their patients are going through and how they may be better able to help the patients at the time in the future. We have local users, we have surgeons in training, and we have end users, and these all integrate to this network to provide full coverage for all aspects of marketing, training, tech support, and patient consultation. We've also developed a sort of a next level version of this. We have embedded the Sauna Link technology in a virtual reality system or a heads-up display system right now using the Oculus Rift, so that by replacing the static 2D camera that we use conventionally with VSee with a 3D 360-degree camera, we're able to provide to the user a full room view. So rather than just looking at the computer screen or just looking at the doctor's face, they're actually able to look around the treatment room and get a better sense of all aspects of the treatment as it's being delivered. As you can imagine, this requires a tremendous amount of bandwidth, which most places don't have. We are working with VSee to determine how we can streamline this process so that we can make this immersive reality aspect of the training and participation a much more prominent portion of our commercial offering. And this is an example also of where one can imagine a local version of VSee in operation. So we described so far in this presentation VSee as an interaction between the person doing the case and people remote from the case. But in order to untether the physician from the computer on which the information is being displayed, there's no reason why one couldn't use a virtual VSee link between the physician in the room and the computer in the room, so that in fact VSee becomes the interface, if you will, untethering the physician, allowing them to walk around the room, to sit, to be outside if they need to, and doing this all in an immersive environment where they feel as if they actually are in the treatment room itself. So, in summary, we've been very excited about using this technology for our clinical application. It's really a significant part of what we do. It's not just an aid. It is not just there if needed. It is actually part of our product offering. There is a disposable component included, required as part of our treatment, and with the purchase of the disposable component, the physician doing the case gets access through VSee to this remote oversight at the company's expense. We pay VSee for the connection, and the physician using the equipment is free to proceed without having to worry about the monetary cost. We use it as a selling tool for our product, not just as a way for potential customers to view an application, but we actually sell the customer on the fact that VSee and this Sauna Link technology that we have is part of our product offering, and that they're buying more than just a piece of equipment. They're buying continuous, perpetual access to skilled and knowledgeable individuals through remote access while they're doing their procedures. Thank you very much.
Dr. Carey, that was really, really exciting, by the way. I guess, can you, I think maybe some of the member may not know much. Can you describe a bit, for example, from using this method versus the other treatment methods, and what are the sort of advantages of everything? I almost feel like everyone should be like know about your.
Sure. Traditionally, prostate tissue is destroyed through radiation therapy or through a surgical intervention where the entire prostate is removed. The problem with those approaches is that they carry with it significant morbidity. Radiation therapy has long-term side effects to any tissue, and surgery has near-term side effects secondary to disruption of nerve system function. The urethra, which is the tube space that runs through the prostate that allows urine to pass out of the body. And the side effect profile for these procedures is relatively high. So somebody, for instance, with prostate cancer that walks in and has a prostatectomy or radiation therapy has a greater than likelihood of coming out with some deficit secondary to that procedure. It may be erectile dysfunction, it may be urinary incontinence, it may be both. The percentages vary depending upon the skill of the surgeon and the radiation oncologist, but there's a reasonable probability that this will happen. The technology that we use has the unique ability to be able to be delivered focally. What that means is that rather than treating the entire prostate because there are cancer cells in a portion of the prostate, with focal ablation, you are able to destroy only a portion of the prostate, that portion of the prostate that may have tissue that is undesirable. And by doing that, you're sparing exposure of the rest of the gland to intervention. That in and of itself results in a lower side effect profile to the point where men who walk into the hospital, let's say with prostate disease, who are treated with our technology with focal ablation, walk out of the hospital with their disease controlled and with the high likelihood that they will have no side effects. They're able to go back to work the next day. They're able to dance and play golf and ride their bike the next day. And they're able to go back to work. One of the things that people fail to appreciate, for instance, about prostate surgery, prostatectomy, is that people who undergo prostatectomy are out of work for 4 to 6 weeks on average. And with our technology, they're back to work the next day. So.
Got it. So Dr. Carey, so in terms of like the market share, I was curious, like, so today, like, what percentage of them are still done through radiation? What percentage are surgery? What percentage are done using your procedure?
So with prostate cancer in the United States, there are about 160,000 patients diagnosed annually. About 20 to 30,000 of those will be watched. They won't have anything done specifically. The urologist will observe and determine whether the cancer is getting worse, more extensive, and whether intervention is necessary or whether it can be ignored. Of the remaining patients, about 80,000, 70 to 80,000 will get prostate surgery, a prostatectomy, usually done with a robot, the Da Vinci robot. And 60 to 70,000 of those patients will have radiation therapy. Our device, focal ablation for prostate, is used in a very, very, very small percentage of patients for two main reasons. One is because it's only been introduced into the United States within the past 2 years. And second of all, because the urology community in general has not embraced yet the concept of treating only a portion of the prostate. In many respects, the treatment of the prostate is where the treatment of the breast was 20 years ago, where if a woman had breast cancer, that she would come in and she would get a mastectomy. There would be no questions asked. And nowadays, approximately 80% of women who receive surgery for breast cancer receive a lumpectomy instead of a mastectomy.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. How about in terms of costs of your thing compared to the other two treatment methods? Are you more expensive?
The cost of the equipment is significantly less by an order of magnitude. The cost of delivering the procedure itself is less because it takes, in general, less time. It's less intensive. The cost to the hospital or the reimbursement to the hospital is less than it would be with surgery and much less than it would be with radiation therapy. But to put it in perspective, if our technology and technology such as ours was universally used in the United States to treat diseases of the prostate for which it is appropriate to use it on, it would save the healthcare industry in the United States over 5 years, approximately $6 billion.
Okay, that's amazing in there, by the way. This almost feels like it's one of those things like the whole world should know about.
Well, from your mouth to their ears.
It's like if something is a better, cheaper, you just feel like, yeah, I do agree. In fact, it's just one of those things. I think unfortunately in the healthcare system, everything just, the innovations spread much, much slower than I think we would like in there.
Physicians are conservative creatures. There's a reason why they call medicine the practice of medicine, is because physicians and surgeons especially like to do what they practiced many, many times over. And there's a natural reticence to new technologies until patients start demanding it. And we believe that ultimately that's what will drive this technology, patients demanding that their disease be treated without significant side effects.
That makes sense in there. I guess we'll open up to audience to ask. Feel free to ask us any questions in there. And maybe I was curious about like how. So, for example, like you being like physician, the entrepreneur, the CEOs in there. So, for example, like what are some of the like the marketing things you're doing? And what are you doing to like evangelize and so make sure the world knows about our system, where they're getting this thing like
events like this?
Okay, that's great.
It very much, when you introduce a new technology or a new approach to doing things, I think you're exactly correct. There is a evangelistic component evangelical component to what you do. I saw this in the early days of intensity modulated radiation therapy, which we introduced as a technology in a company that I had called Nomos in the early 1990s. And arguably for the first 6 years of that technology's existence, it was basically spent going around and talking to national organizations, to physicians, to healthcare societies, et cetera, to get them exposed to what this technology had the potential to do. I think that same thing exists here. One of the problems, frankly, that we have as a company, and some of you may have noticed that sometimes I say cancer and sometimes I don't. And that's because when I'm talking specifically about our device, we do not have regulatory authorization to treat cancer. Okay. That would mean that we had demonstrated that, in fact, we are effective at destroying and controlling cancer. What we demonstrated to the FDA was that we have technology that is effective at ablating prostate tissue. It is the physician's determination as to what that technology, our technology, is appropriate to do, which makes it a little bit difficult to have a conversation. Even, again, as I'm talking here, I have to try and be careful about when I say cancer and when I don't say cancer, and that complicates our marketing efforts as well. In addition, remember that I said that physicians in general are conservative. Urologists are even more conservative, at least compared to fields that I come from, meaning neurosurgery and radiation oncology. Neurosurgeons are sort of out there at the bleeding edge and like to push the envelope, unlike many other practitioners of medicine who like to use what are tried and true techniques for treating and taking care of their patients. But we attend meetings, we hold webinars. I think if you go to our website, you'll see a lot of educational materials there so that people can learn. We believe that in addition to selling product, we have to educate as well, and we spend a lot of time doing that.
God, I almost feel like that maybe if you could get to that, like through the FDA thing, getting that is actually framed as a treating cancer, and then once you have that piece of work, then you just get a couple of these sort of celebrities to talk up your system, then maybe that just become the standard of care right there.
Yeah, you should never wish cancer on anybody, but if there's someone out there who's a celebrity who has prostate cancer and is interested in talking to us about a way of treating it that we believe is very effective and safe, we'd be glad to talk to them.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have a question from the audience. Again, though, hey, so what are the prerequisites for a young doctor to practice telesurgery? Is there any different or it's just like?
Well, I think that the answer to that question is changing dramatically. I think if we're talking about telesurgery, which means, or teleintervention, in the old days, that would have meant some kind of sophisticated mechanical device that one could control remotely, and therefore you needed a sophisticated device. You needed a version, let's say, of a Da Vinci robot that could be controlled across the world, as opposed to what they have now, which only can be controlled from within the room. I think that's changing, though, because more and more interventions in medicine are being done through computer-driven systems. I think that a comfort and flexibility and willingness to interface with a computer directly, as opposed to interfacing in the tried and true method of medicine through the patient, is a prerequisite. Comfort with video games. It sounds like a joke, but we find that the young surgeons that we're dealing with are much more adept at learning our technology and being comfortable with interacting with the computer screen and making adjustments and moving things around on a computer screen than, let's say, would an older surgeon such as myself, maybe, who is more used to actually physically using one's hands to manipulate the instruments.
Got it. That makes sense. So I have a question from Brad. So he's asking, so a lot of the physicians, right, they're very occupied with, the medical legal concerns, liabilities, all these things. Like what are you doing to address that? Again, so he's asking specifically is, the whole medical industry, it just, it's almost like we can quote unquote failures and imagination, sluggishness, right, all these things. Like, are you doing anything to try to break out of that?
Yeah, this is a big issue, perhaps in a way that the questioner hasn't thought about. The way that we have our system set up, in principle, we could take control of the procedure. We have that disabled on the system. So effectively, the way to think about what's happening with our technology is, imagine that a surgeon is doing an appendectomy, and they see something that they haven't seen before, and they're not sure exactly how to deal with it. So they get the nurse to dial up the professor at the local university, and the professor gets on the phone, and the surgeon describes what he's seeing, what he's doing, and the professor says, "Oh, I've seen that before. This is how you should deal with it." And then the surgeon goes back and does it. That's essentially what we're doing. We have somebody remotely doing that. By using VSee, we're able to share with the remote doctor everything that the local doctor is seeing. But there are medical legal issues associated with the information. For instance, that patient's treatment plan is traveling over the web to a remote physician, a remote user. And so there are HIPAA issues associated with that. The data from that treatment is being stored on the local computer. There are HIPAA issues associated with that. So we have to implement certain firewalls. We have to implement certain protections. We have to implement certain ways that the data is managed and treated in order to protect the patient's privacy. Medical legally, we haven't anticipated or foreseen any issues above and beyond that which one would normally run into if a third party was advising the local doctor.
Got it. Okay, understood. So I have a question from Sherry. So are there other uses of your technology outside of prostate?
Yeah, great question. She can come work for my marketing team. She's not a shill, but by the end of this year, we will be applying in early clinical investigations the technology that we have, both the SaunaBlade, which is a non-invasive or minimally invasive device, and something called Sonatherm, which is a smaller version of that probe, which is an invasive device. We will be running early clinical trials in rectal cancer, cervical cancer, breast cancer, thyroid cancer, kidney cancer, and interestingly enough, we've only talked about using focused ultrasound in this conversation to destroy tissue. But if you dial the energy down and you change the pulse sequences,
Yeah.
etc., of the energy. It doesn't destroy, but it alters the local cellular environment reversibly. So we are involved in some early trials looking at using low energy focused ultrasound in the treatment of peripheral artery disease, using it to alter the blood-brain barrier, etc. For Sherry, if she goes to looks up on the web the Focused Ultrasound Foundation.
Okay.
The Focused Ultrasound Foundation has a page on their website which lists all of the various applications that focused ultrasound is being looked at for clinical benefit. The ones that I described are specifically the ones that we're looking at.
Got it. Really, Betty, this is like it's so exciting. All the things here in the pipeline. Almost, I feel like accelerate this. I just feel like it is a wonderful, alternative to surgery and radiation. It's just like
I firmly believe, and I would say this even if I wasn't the CEO of the company, I firmly believe that our technology or technology like it has the potential to be part of almost every single medical intervention in the future, in some way, shape, form, or another. Whether it's for destruction or enhancement or modification, ultrasound has very interesting impact on tissue, which has been known for decades. This technology actually came out of sonar work post-World War II, done in the Midwest by the Fry brothers at the University of Illinois, that was then adapted for tissue destruction. But I think that it has tremendous potential, and I think that your viewers will, if they stay attuned to it, will see this evolve over the next several years to become much more prominent.
Got it. So in terms of your market, do you focus only on the US or do you focus outside? The reason I'm asking is maybe outside the US, they might have different regulatory environments, allow you to test some of these concepts maybe even faster than within the US.
In fact, we started internationally because we've had CE mark approval for our technology since the early 2000s.
Okay.
We are improved in 50 or 60 countries around the world.
Okay.
We're working to get into the Chinese market, where there's tremendous receptivity to focused ultrasound. The Japanese market, where people see focused ultrasound as an alternative to radiation therapy, where there's an understandable reluctance to grasp and partake of radiation therapy in Japan for obvious reasons. I think you're correct that there are certain barriers to clinical investigation outside the U.S. because of our regulatory authorization that don't exist in the U.S. So many of the clinical trials that I described earlier in terms of where we're going will actually be done in Europe and in Asia rather than in the U.S. just because we're able to do it.
Got it. Okay. But I'll be giving a talk in China in the end of March. I'll be happy to do some evangelizing.
That would be great.
This is wonderful. We have a great question from Yakov. So he said, "How did you persuade your very first customers to try out this thing? Like how did you find your first evangelist?"
You mean to try out ablation of the prostate?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I was not around when that occurred. It actually the first patients treated the first prostates treated were in men with BPH, benign prostatic hypertrophy. Okay. This was done in the late 1990s.
Okay.
And I think the way that with this specific technology, they were able to convince people to participate is twofold. First, I think most people would be surprised at how receptive patients are to new technologies. In fact, they want to be part of something new. They want to be a pioneer. They want to be able to say to their friends and colleagues, I was the first or the second. to be treated with this technology. And look how good I'm doing. That's number one. Number two, because of the very nature of the technology, you're not, to use a poor choice of words, burning any bridges. That is if you use focused ultrasound to ablate tissue, you can always have surgery afterwards. You can still get radiation therapy. If you operate on something and you remove something that you shouldn't have removed, or there's side effects, it's not like you can get a do-over. With this technology, even today, when we ablate prostate tissue, one of the reasons why we can do focal ablations of prostate tissue is because if it turns out that there's additional cells outside the area that we ablated, we can ablate again. It's another day of treatment, but we can ablate again. There's no tissue memory to the heat that we deposit, unlike, for instance, with radiation therapy, where there is a tissue memory, and therefore you can only get radiated once to a specific area of tissue.
This is wonderful. This just feels like I'm not a physician. It just feels like, from my completely naive perspective, it would just should be the standard care across the world.
Thank you very much.
We have a question.
We need to have you talk to the insurance companies.
Okay. I'll be care my flight to evangelize for you. Really, it's just something like that. I just feel like it's like, why not? It's just one of the things. I think we have a question from Vlad in the audience. Is like, so how are you using telemedicine for marketing? Like, do you capture cases? Do you show other physicians? Do you let a prospective patient to talk with you by telemedicine to talk about procedures? Or like, what are some?
Well, two ways specifically. The first is that we do capture cases, and then we are able to, for instance, if we had more time, I'd be able to show you a portion of a case that we've done. And we use that as part of our marketing tools, but you don't need telemedicine to be able to do that. You just need to record the case and then show it as a YouTube video. More specifically, the way that we use it for marketing is as I described. We have a prospective physician who's heard about this at meetings. Our salesperson goes in and talks to him, gives him the brochures, etc. And the doctor says, yeah, but I need to see a procedure. I need to see what's involved. And so we say, okay, fine, we will fly you from California to Florida. And he says, no, I can't do that because that requires me to take 3 days away from my office, and I can't afford that unless you, Sonacare, are going to pay me to go away from my office. So instead, what we do is we bring in a laptop, and we, through VSee, dial them into a case live that's being delivered by a urologist in Florida, North Carolina, Louisville, Texas, and the prospective buyer can interact with the existing user while the case is ongoing, and we have relationships with these existing users where they will take the time, and they love to teach, where they will tell the prospective viewer exactly what they're seeing, why the user is doing what they're doing, and then questions can be asked like how easy it is to learn, are you happy with the results, or would you use somebody else's technology, things like that.
That makes a lot of sense in there. Do you also use this telemedicine for like post-surgery patient follow-up, the checking on them, find them just to...
We don't, because we don't control the patient.
The supply.
It's very possible that urologists do, and in fact, that's something that we might want to explore with VSee because the technology is not universally available in the United States. We have somewhere around 50 to 70 locations in the U.S. that have access to the technology. But for instance, if you were in Wyoming or Minnesota or Idaho or South Dakota, and you wanted to have one of these procedures, the likelihood is that you might have to fly to North Carolina or New York or California to get the procedure done. You're not going to want to fly back to visit that doctor, that urologist, for your follow-up. But the urologist does want to follow up with you. So the concept of using the technology that they already have built into their console for doing the cases to follow them up might be something that we can explore as a way of cementing that relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense. I almost feel like it reminds me, like I did an internship at Intel, like when during my PhD. And so they came out, Intel was always a chip inside. Then in order to build a market share, then they wanted that like the Intel is almost like go after the direct, the purchasing. There's like create all these marketing thing. I also feel like this might be a strategy for you to help your customers better engage with patients. Of course, now this create a positive feedback loop. Then your customer get better woman that help them even spread the word like to other urologists.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. Yeah, I agree.
Got it. Okay. As we wrapping up, by the first, we apologize. There's a bunch of other questions that's actually we haven't able to got to it. So again, so for the audience member who didn't got to your question, I apologize. And then we'll send the question to Dr. Carroll, so we'll post the answers as part of
I'd be glad to answer any questions that you send to me by email.
Yeah, and then as we wrap up, Dr. Carroll, I would like to maybe ask you just three like really rapid fire questions. The first question is like, so you share a lot of insights today. So if the audience member can only take one thing away, learn from you today, what should that be?
There are certain medical technologies that are so computer-based that they lend themselves perfectly to non-in-person, on-site interaction. Our technology is one of those, and VSee is a great platform for being able to provide that interaction.
Got it. Okay. So the second question is, so what is that one thing you believe that the rest of the world doesn't yet within this sphere of digital health and healthcare?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What is something that you believe that the rest of the world do not believe yet?
Yeah. There are Martians? No, I guess that doesn't qualify. I think that it's the responsibility of everybody practicing medicine to figure out low-cost ways of delivering care to as many people as possible. Companies need to make a profit, but they don't need to rape society, both on the pharmaceutical and the device side. And we need to adjust our healthcare system so that people have access to the care that they need and don't get charged for things that they don't need.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And then the final question is, if you could meet with President Trump and you could ask him to do one thing, what will you ask him?
Sorry, I can't go there. Because what I would ask him to do probably isn't possible within our electoral system. I think that, okay, to be fair, consistency.
Okay. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Again, Dr. Garrett, thank you so much for joining us. It was like, I personally learned a lot from you. I really, really, really appreciate the chance sharing with us. Can you share the closing announcement?
I just want to thank VSee for making this opportunity available and for working with us. Oh, I thought you meant me announcement. I can see you have announcements. Sorry.
No. Okay, so Dr. Thank you so much. We definitely really enjoy working with you in that. I really think, like, sincerely, not just because I'm interviewing you, I really sincerely believe that the world everyone should know about your procedure. Patients should demand it. You're so it should become just the standard of care across the world in there. It should go create
Thank you.
So much good in there. And then, so for the audience member again, so we're pretty excited. So our annual conference, Telehealth Failure Secrets to Success, where our registration open is going to be held in October 2nd to the 4th in the Silicon Valley. If you have interesting speakers you think we should have speak, definitely send us a note to media@vsee.com. Again, we're lining up some really interesting speakers. I think you're going to be pretty enjoy that. Again, now we're also gearing up for American Telemedicine Association. So we're pretty excited. We'll have the biggest booth of the entire show. We'll have a bunch of partners exhibiting inside our booth. We're gonna have a round the session talks in there again. So if you want to partner with us, we can do some doing joint marketing and sharing sales leads in there. Send a note to Becky. Again, we're also pretty excited with our large telehealth boat and motorcycle backpack competitions. Actually, the conference will be held in November in the Philippines. But again, we'll open this up again. So we're pretty excited using that as a mechanism to impact care. Our goal is to touch about 2 billion people through this new way of telemedicine. Again, if you're interested to become a sponsor or judge for the competition, definitely let us know. And then also we're writing the blueprint for how to decrease healthcare. Again, our goal is to work with our physician investors to create a model to decrease the cost of healthcare by 50%. Again, so leveraging innovation like Dr. Carroll's. And again, so if you're interested in helping us write that, definitely let us know. Again, then we also have 2 exciting video podcasts coming up. On March 21st, we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Omeros at Stanford University again. So he's just done all sort of stuff from drones to worlds, just like healthcare, just a bunch of interesting things I think you'll really enjoy. And then after that, we have a conversation focused on opioid crisis and telehealth with Brad again. It's going to be you're going to find that really, really interesting. It's a conversation. Definitely hope you can join those conversations. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Carroll, for sharing your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.